topics. It will not render without 9 topics. Well, but I'm lazy, so I have a big button that initializes like 25 of those topics already. So this is a list of topics. You see it. Once again, it looks like it belongs. It's a list that belongs in Teams. So there's a list of topics. You can select multiple of them, remove them. It changes the icon on top. You select them all, like the 3 dots behind. You've got the overflow menu. I'm so proud of that. It took me ages to build it. No, it's not true. It's a kit, and I will show you how this works. But this is fun. So if you do one more, is there someone that adds a topic? You've got, sorry, I was on mute, and a cat meows in your meeting. Someone else having something happening in their meeting that you want to add to my meeting bingo app? No, no one? Okay, I'll take just. That's it. So if we know, we know now, join the meeting. No, I will show something else first. So in this browser window, I'm logged in as a different user. This user did not organize this meeting, but it's just a participant. Now, if he goes into the meeting application or the meeting bingo application, he just sees the list of topics, doesn't get the selection option, doesn't get the add topic. So only the organizer can add more topics to my meeting bingo application. You can see that? Like, this is better. So you see, contextual based on the role in your meeting. I wanted to do a lot more, but it's so hard to get the role of someone in a meeting. So if you join the Teams meeting, let's not do audio and turn off. Oh no, I cannot do that, I think, because then I will ruin the recording for everyone. So you see that the app shows here another one of those default icons on the top bar of my meeting. If you open it up, I'm the organizer. You see it all goes in steps, and then you refresh your bingo card, and there's my bingo card. So every time something happens in this meeting, I can click and it gets selected. So much fun to play in your meeting. Now, the thing about this app is that if you get a row or a column, it also, normally, if everything works out, posts bingo in the chat. Now, you might not want that in a real application. People knowing in your meeting that you're playing meeting bingo and it goes like, bingo, I got a row. Man, maybe not what you want, but it's to show off all the possibilities, of course. So if we're going back to the meeting bingo application, and this is the steps, normally you put a nice spinning loading logo on it so that it doesn't flash as a red badge, but I run out of time to prepare. So I can refresh the card again, do it again, and get bingo. Now, the one part that's totally new, and I think it's still in preview or maybe out of preview, is the fact that you can get your meeting application not only in the side panel, as it is now, but you can put it shared stage. Probably some of you saw it before. So you can present your application. I put it in as well. So it goes into the big thing on top, in the middle, basically. The part here is that, or the thing here is that it shows what I'm seeing on the screen to everyone. So it's like presenting your screen. Now I'm presenting my application. And this is basically it. So this is my app. It took me ages to build for a reason. And I will run through the code and the options that were there. So who in this room is a developer? Only 2. Okay. Who in this room occasionally writes code? No. Yeah, see, I knew. There must be people that don't think of themselves as developers but still write code. So I will be showing a lot of code. If you're unable to follow, please tell me. I will try and explain slowly again. First of all, to start your application, I'm switching back to the slides because this part is easier. To start your application, so demo time, we've got that. You have to prepare your environment. So, and what I mean is you have to prepare your computer to work or to be able to develop this application. So the one thing, or the at least the 4 things you need is Visual Studio Code, kind of important to write your code, but you can take any other editor. I just like to promote Microsoft stuff. You take the Yeoman generator, like Yo is a scaffolding option in your command prompt, and people plug in templates in there so that you can get a default application already. And the third one is the Themes generator, which is created by Victor Whelan and now maintained by the community. And the Themes generator plugs into the Yo generator, basically. So you can do Yo Themes, and it generates an app for you. Pretty awesome. And then you need Ngrok or Ngrok or whatever people call it, which is a tunneling tool. It exposes your locally running application that runs on localhost and gives it a public URL, like meetingbingo.ngrok.eu.com, I think is what my URL was, so that it's reachable from the internet. When I run this on my computer, when it's running, and you go to that URL, you will find my app. If I stop running on my computer, the app is gone. So it kind of tunnels it back to everything that's running locally on my computer. One piece of advice, buy the Ngrok license every month. Like, it costs €5. It's so much simpler for your development experience if you pay the €5. Reason is, Ngrok, if you in the free mode, generates a new URL every time you run Ngrok. That's pretty annoying if you're developing, and every time you get a random URL string. If you buy the license or the subscription, it will give you the same URL every time. Much easier to work. And then you need an app registration for single sign-on. People done that before, single sign-on in Teams application? Yes? So it's pretty simple. You create your application in Azure Active Directory. You get a client ID. You make sure that it has the right permission scopes. I'm using chat.read, chat.read-write, because I have to post bingo into the chat window. Online meetings read, because I want all the contextual information of my meeting. And user.read, because it's default and I just did not remove it. And you have to expose an API. Exposing an API is important for the SSO part of Teams applications. Teams, or in Teams app, requires your SSO registration to be in a specific format. If you do it out of the box, it does API and then just the ID of your application, but you have to put in the URL in between. It has to be that URL. And that's also the reason why paying for Ngrok pays off, because if Ngrok generates a new URL every time, you have to go update this every time. So if you do Control-C and you crash out of Ngrok, you have to go through all of this again. You don't like that. Well, I don't like that, maybe you do, but it's not very efficient. You have to add a scope, access as a user, and you have to add 2 client applications. One is the Teams mobile client, the other one is the Teams desktop client. And that basically tells that you as a user can get an SSO token or like an access token from both of these clients. So if your app is running in mobile or in desktop, those 2 can get an access token for you. And then you have to scaffold the app. And I have some tips to increase your developer experience as well. Out of the box, it's not bad, but it's not great either. I cannot make it great, but I can make it better. I'm totally honest here. So if we move back to my command prompt, I will make it big. I will clear out. So what you do here, can everybody read that here? Or do I make it bigger? I can make it bigger. No, it's okay. So you do Yo, remember the Yo generator, and it gives me run a generator. People that do SharePoint Framework development know that if you do Yo and you've got the SharePoint Framework developer experience installed, you get Microsoft SharePoint. Now I've got Teams. I select the generator, and it will ask a whole bunch of questions. Like,
can you please make it a little bigger?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you very much.
See. So if you do, and it offers you a lot of out-of-the-box options. So you don't have to do anything. I just take all the defaults. Comes first meeting bingo application. I use the current folder. The title of my application is comes first meeting bingo. My company name, it remembers from last time. You pick a manifest version, like if you run or create a Microsoft Teams application, I hope you know, it's two parts. It's your code that runs somewhere on your servers or on Azure, and there's this one tiny piece of a zip file that contains one JSON file that basically tells Teams, you have to go there to fetch all the information about the application. And it has versions. We do quick scaffolding. We skip the partner ID, and we only create a tab. So that's what I did. A tab. You give it a URL. This does not matter. You can change it afterwards. So I keep the URL. I will not do a loading indicator. I will not do the renderer. No testing, because who does testing? So we're skipping that. Doing ESLint, and we're ignoring the telemetry, the default tab name, and all of that. It just goes through all of it. And then, oh yeah, forgot. And we make it configurable. This is the part that you change. You can do both, but for an in-meeting Teams tab, it has to be a group chat. I don't know why, it doesn't really make sense. Well, kind of does, knowing that a meeting is basically a group chat with something added to it. So in a group chat, and we will do single sign-on. And then you have to put in the application ID for the app registration that you just did. We run through, and then it will already give you that single sign-on kind of URL. So you take that as well. We don't do it in SharePoint Online, and then it goes around npm and install everything. And now we have to wait, but we're not waiting. We'll just switch to a different thing, different window, while all of that runs on the conference cable, not Wi-Fi, lucky me. I'm making it bigger. Demos, meeting bingo. And I already have a structure in here. So by default, it generates a structure that you can open in Visual Studio Code. So everything is there. Everything is in source. So there's a client, a server, and a manifest. So let's start with the, let's see. We're making some changes to the default setup first. First of all, update your environment file. Environment file, it's all of the information that you need to run your application locally. So it will replace, it's kind of your variable store or something. Because every time you run the application, all the variables like public host name or package name will be replaced inside the rest of the code. So you have to make sure that this is up to date. Now, most of this has been filled in by running through the Yeoman generator. The thing that you want to change here, you want to set up your Ngrok authentication key, and I will be switching out mine after this session, so you can take a photograph, but I will reset it. And you want to add the tab app secret, the app secret that we generated for the application in Azure Active Directory. It's not there by default, so I added a line because I need it in my server to create more access tokens. So you put that in here. The other thing that you would want to change is the VS Code launch JSON file. So Visual Studio Code is pretty good at doing debugging. And every time that you debug this application and you run, you go like this and you run debug in Edge. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. But the thing is, Edge starts every time with a clean profile, which means that every time you want to test your application, you go to teams.microsoft.com, it will ask you to log in again. That's not great. So the trick here is that you give it a user data directory. It's a new thing that you put in here. You give it a path to a specific folder where your profile is stored. So the first time it starts, you log into Teams, and it will remember that for the rest of your debug sessions. It's a trick I learned recently only, so I still wanted to share. Maybe some of the 3 developers in this room knew this, but it's pretty awesome to know. So the things that I changed as well, is in the manifest file. What it does by default is it takes a specific URL here. Now, because of the fact that we are changing while developing with Ngrok the URL, it's not the public URL, I change it to public hostname / tab ID. Just a way to make sure that every time that Ngrok updates their URL, this gets updated with the right information. By default, there's something else in there, but I make that change. The same here in the actual tab, I make the change as well. Here, on line 125. Because otherwise, things get messy when Ngrok recreates your URL. So those are the changes I make for an easy development experience, or an easier development experience. I was pretty proud of my UI, remember? Like, yay, it looked great. Now, how did I do that? I didn't build this myself. So there are two libraries that you might want to use in your application. First one is Fluent UI / React North Star. I'm not going to bore you with the whole what Fluent UI thing is. Like Fluent UI, not Fluid Framework. Like at the same time, they're making everything pretty difficult to understand. So Fluent UI is all of their packages that contain UI components. React North Star is the one that creates or has controls for themes that look and feel like themes. You can have the other ones available that look like SharePoint and Office 365. You can mix and match, but it will look really horrible. So React North Star is what you want if you're building a Teams application. Now, React North Star is a set of components, but very, very low level. Like it does a breadcrumb. If it loads, I hope it loads. So you put in this code in your React, and it generates a breadcrumb like this, or potentially like this, which looks and feels like SharePoint, but it's just the breadcrumb. You can have an input field, but that means that if you want to build an experience that looks and feels really like Microsoft Teams, it will take you a long time to put all of those controls together. So that's why Microsoft created what they call a UI kit. So the Teams React UI library. It's built on top of the Fluent UI React North Star stuff, but it has all of these things in there already for you. So this is a dashboard that you plug in as a dashboard, and you provide it with inputs. Let me see. So it's under knobs. So you're provided with a whole lot of configuration. See? And then it renders by default this. Lots of nice stuff. Now, this is the one that I picked. See? It's easy. I just stole this and plugged it in. No, it's not stolen, it's reused. You should say reused. So I reused all of this, and even on the top right, I didn't implement it, but you can get filters and find. So all of that is already in there. In that component, the only thing you have to do is plug in a gazillion amount of configuration code here. So this is like the empty state. So all of that is what you need to make it work. And then it looks like this. You can add your own buttons on the bottom. You can add buttons in the toolbar. You can do a lot of things in there. And that's what I did for my, I don't know if this works. No. So again, like if you do kitchen sink is like their full-blown example. It does everything that this UI component can do. So everything is in here, and you can play around with it. So this is what I use to make it look and feel like Teams. Okay, I have to go quicker apparently. In meeting context. So I told you, I wanted my application to have different experiences before, during, and after the meeting. In the content pane in a Teams, like in a meeting setup before the meeting, but also in the side panel inside the meeting. Now, the way you do that is when you build a tab for Teams, you can get the context. You can get a context object that provides you with this information. Now, the context object with Yeoman generator, you get it by doing use themes. And then it puts everything in these, so it returns all of this data. So you've got the Teams context. If we go to the definition of Teams context, see, it's Microsoft Teams.context, and there's a lot of stuff in there. So you can get the group ID or the team ID, where your application is running, the channel ID and channel name. So all of that is in there. Now, the one thing that you would want is, or the thing you would want is, if I can find it, I will just do meeting. So you want meeting ID. That's the one you want. If meeting ID is filled in, it means your application is running in context of a meeting. So you know that your app is running in a meeting. It will be empty when it's not in a meeting. So if it's running as a normal tab in Teams, like in a channel or something, this will be empty. That's an easy check if it's running in Teams or not, in a meeting or not. So that's one thing you want. And the other one you want is frame context. So frame context basically tells you where is my app loaded. So if I do context.frameContext, you will get one of these values. So you get, well, I do side panel, which is easy because that's the meeting side panel. And I do meeting stage because that's easy as well. It's self-explanatory. It's the meeting stage. It's the big one when you're presenting. Now, the before and after, it will get you content. So you have to combine meeting ID with content, like frame context content, because otherwise frame context content is also used when your app is running in a group chat, in a channel tab, or everything. So you have to combine the two to make sure that it's running in Teams, inside a meeting, excuse me. And to make this work, or make your app show up, you have to make a tweak to your manifest file. So by default, this is not here. By default, this is your configurable tab. See, it does public host name, my meeting bingo tab, everything is generated, and it says that this tab can run in a group chat. Now, if you want your tab to be, or to work inside a Teams meeting, you have to add context. Context options, and you have to tell it that it's available in the meeting chat, in the details, which is when you open your meeting from the calendar, that's meeting details. From the side panel, we discussed that one, it slides out from the right in your in-meeting experience, and meeting stage, the big one when it's presenting. So you need this one, and then you also need meeting surfaces, which now can only have side panel and stage as a value. I don't know why this is. This is the one thing that I do not know and do not understand. If I put meeting side panel in here, why do I need meeting surfaces? What's the difference between the two? I have no clue, but you need them both. I asked Microsoft, I got no response yet, so we'll see what the reason is. So this is the manifest file. You need that adjusted so that your app will show or your tab will show inside the meeting. We've got the environment file, the launch file, so all of that is done. So that's how you find your context. So if we're looking at, for example, here, I'll close this and this. You see that I check if we're in a meeting, like context on meeting ID exists, and if we're in like a side panel or in a meeting stage. If that works, it means we're in app and we create the bingo grid. I just fetch 9 items from the big list. Just a way to check if something is running in the side panel. Another thing you might want to do, so I'm closing this, is adjust the SSO code. So by default, the SSO code is generated, but you need to store the access token so that you can use it to call your backend API, like your server API. Excuse me. So I'm storing that one, and that's the changes you make to your application, besides all of the code you need to write to make this thing work, actually. But this is like the plumbing code that you need to make the things do their work. Now, the last part was about getting the meeting details. I think, did I skip something? Oh yeah, I will do first the development experience, like debugging, because we all love to debug. And debugging is, well, you can do it in multiple ways. So first of all, if you have your application in the command prompt, you get gulp, Ngrok, serve, which is an action, which will serve your application on a localhost file, like a localhost URL, but it will also start Ngrok and give it a URL, like a public URL. This is part of the actions that are included with the YoTeams generator of PMP. So it's pretty easy there. If you run it, yes, I always forget this one. 15.4. Shit. Oh, excuse me. So I'm using NVM to switch my node versions, and it defaults back to version 10 or something, so it doesn't run. But you didn't see that. I do clear, and you didn't see that things went wrong. So you do gulp ngrok serve, and it starts it all up. And you see that it starts at meetingbingo.eu.ngrok.io. That's where my app is running. I will cancel out because there are two parameters that you might want to use as well. The first one is debug, because it makes sure that you can attach a debugger to it. The second one that you might want is publish. So publish in there takes your meeting manifest, your zip file, and puts it in the Teams admin center in the Teams store. So from this command prompt, it takes your app and it sideloads it into your Teams environment for you. It uses Microsoft 365 CLI to do the authentication and to the like the deployment of that application. You don't have to do publish every time. You only have to do publish when your public URL is changed, because the public URL is part of your manifest file. So if you do a free Ngrok and you know how the story continues, the URL changes and you have to do publish every time. Now I pay for Ngrok, so I don't need publish. One time is enough. So if you do debug and you let it run, this is what you want. Now we have to wait until both client and server are running. Server is always faster. Client is slow because it has to compile the whole of React in there. And there we go. So it's running now. So the way you could debug this, it's like you do meeting bingo and it opens up and you can go inspect and go into sources, and all of that is there. So you can select everything in there if you want. Like there's here Webpack, and you can find your sources and everything in here. So all of this is here. You can debug from your console in the browser. You can also attach a debugger to it. By default, it will start a new Edge window, run everything, but it will attach, the new Edge window is necessary for the front end, like the front end breakpoints. So you have to do all of your running through your code through here. And the attach to server is for my backend. So if I put a breakpoint in my backend, it will get hit as well. Let's try this one. And then you can already also open it up from your Teams client. So the backend you can test with the Teams client, with the window, with everything. So you see it's gone flashing red, and now it takes time to actually hit the breakpoint for some reason. And then you can see that you can run through all of your code in Visual Studio Code, because you attach a debugger to it, and you can run through your application. Now, see, it finally hit. So this is where we're waiting for. You can step through, you can see, like everyone wants to see my access token, right? So it's here. See? So this is the one that you need to access other information on Graph. So that's why there's an access token. If we do meeting bingo tab, for example, in the front end, like this, you have to open up the app. This was not on purpose, but it works out quite fine. This is the high contrast theme of Teams. My app works with that as well. Hopefully, if it picks up. No, the breakpoint doesn't hit. So it's loading the breakpoint, but it does hit the front end if you run through your application from the Teams, like the Edge browser. The biggest issue is when you want to debug your application as an in-meeting experience. Because the tabs here, if I switch back, the tabs here in both the Teams client as well as in the tabs here in meeting, before or after the meeting, they run in the browser. You can open that tab in the browser. Now the side panel or the meeting stage is only supported in the Teams desktop client. So you cannot do like right click. It's not right clicking. I don't know what's happening with my computer. I'm sorry. Something is very, very wrong. Let's see. I will stop the debugger. Close off this. So you cannot go like here, right click and inspect, open the debug tools of your browser and run through it, because your Teams client is not a browser. So it's very difficult to run through the code when the thing is running in meeting. There is a little trick. I don't know if you know this one, but if you right click on this, you see you've got a small menu. You know, if you go left click 6 times on this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and do right click. Oh, do I need to do more? Yeah, like I'm always doing nah. Then this menu gets bigger and super cool because there's like dev tools in here, and you can get all the web contents. So all the dev tools for everything that Teams client runs. It opens a lot, so don't do that. Do select web contents. It gives you a new menu, and you want web view. Most of the time, it's web view. That's where your app is running. So if you do that, and you open web view, then you can put breakpoints in here or write to the console and follow along. So this helps you a lot to test your application inside the Teams client. Because you get teams.microsoft.com iframe container, because basically Teams web app or the Teams desktop client is just an Electron wrapper around the web application. And this is the way that you get to the Edge Dev tools on your Teams desktop client. Okay? So we've got about 10 to 15 minutes, I think. Are there any questions at this point that you would like to see, hear me talk about? Yes, Danny.
And just for our virtual attendees, you can raise your hands.
Hello, Danny here. And I guess you are doing all these things in TypeScript, or am I wrong?
I do all of this in TypeScript. The reason is that the human generator generates the default project structure in TypeScript, and I love TypeScript a lot more than plain JavaScript. Well, it's a preference. You can build this in ASP.NET as well if you would like.
So you can build this in C#?
Well, you should build or would need to build it in Blazor because a lot of this stuff is running front end. So you need to do a lot of things in the front end of your web application. But you can run it as a React on top of ASP.NET MVC. I'm doing my backend in Node.js as well. So my server runs in Node.js as well. But you could do an API on Azure Functions or on whatever you would like.
And do you have tips or advices for C# developers to come as fast as possible or as soon as possible to TypeScript for all these new modern things?
Find a course. And TypeScript is, in my opinion, it feels really much as C#. So if you know C# development, it'll be fast to get started with TypeScript. You will not get the details right in the beginning, but it's easy to start writing code in TypeScript and you'll figure it out along the way. That's how I did it. I didn't do a course. I just knew how to do C# and then I started writing TypeScript. And you will not like it at some points, but you can get started pretty easy.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Anybody remote that wants to see something? Yes. So unfortunate that I don't get to throw the thing around.
Yeah, a bit nasty feedback then. I was trying this out. I hadn't realised that Yo Teams now had it. So first thing I'm going to do is go and throw away what I've got ready and rebuild it in Yo Teams as a first one. But a lot of the issues I had was with the deployment, that I found the app was there, and then if I deployed the new version, it either wouldn't pick up the one, and then it wouldn't apply to meetings, and was really inconsistent. Now the answer might be Yo Teams, but just wondering if you'd seen anything with that.
Well, did you change your meeting, like your app URL in the
Yeah,
in between
various bits in the manifest, but it seemed to not always register because it's using free Ngrok. I know I should not be stingy and just pay for it, which I might do to solve that. But
I had a discussion before that I feel, and that's my opinion, you need Ngrok to do this development. If Microsoft wants us to do this, the first thing should be that at least by default it should be possible without paying another third-party tool. Well, that's my opinion. They're building something in Visual Studio Code with the tool, like the toolkit, but it suffers from the same things as Yo suffers from. The fact that you cannot deploy directly in meeting. That just does not work because the whole thing is based on web, and Teams does not support in-meeting applications in your web client. So the solution that I found for your problem is to use Yo, because the publish flag makes sure that everything runs smoothly and gets updated and published, and that works out quite fine. I didn't run into any issues. Now what I see is if you go manually update and you go to the Teams admin center and you upload it there and stuff like that, some stuff doesn't get refreshed. But when you're uploading through the API, apparently it gets picked up pretty quickly. Okay. And I don't change version numbers. So
so that works as well.
That works. So I publish every time I manifest again without changing version numbers. So it doesn't have to pick up the new version number. It doesn't get tripped by that. It works. Then you publish, sideload through the API. Okay?
And kind of slightly related question to Denny. So, are there any thoughts with Yo Teams to bring C# and Blazor supports? No,
will not happen.
No. Okay.
I saw a GitHub issue where people asked that, and the maintaining team is not interested in building that because they're focused on TypeScript and Node.js, and that's just easier for them, and we cannot really blame it. So if you want that in there in Yo Teams, you can submit a pull request and build it yourself. So they're not,
exactly.
They're not, it's not their focus. So they're not planning to do that.
Lovely. Thank you.
If you want that, by the way, it might be in the Visual Studio toolkit sooner, or maybe later-ish. I don't know.
Just to confirm to the last question, I just wanted to ask again, is this on the roadmap of Blazor? Because it's so unfortunate that Microsoft is working with Blazor and done all this new, I say, really nice Teams things, and maybe it's for the rest of SharePoint too, all the new web things. They do TypeScript, but quite unfortunate.
It's pretty awful, yes. So again, they're building a Visual Studio toolkit for Visual Studio Code. They're building one for Visual Studio. Stuff will come in there, and they might do Blazor, I don't know. But they have for Visual Studio something that does C#, so you can use that one. There's Yo Teams that does everything in TypeScript, and that's community driven. And for the whole Blazor thing, there's Tommy Gull, another MVP from Swiss, I think. He does a lot with Blazor. Austria, I'm sorry. I'm so I didn't offend him now. So like he does a lot with Blazor, and he is trying to figure that out. So if you want more information, I point you to him because he is the expert on Blazor in Teams. Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay, I got a bonus. Because I struggle with it, and I don't want you to struggle with it as well. So let me switch to... So I'm skipping all the slides because I talked about all the slides. So let's see.
So we have 7 minutes until the next session.
That's okay. I wanted full meeting details. Remember? I wanted all the contextual information about the meeting. So there is an API call in the SDK that's like meeting.get meeting details. Unfortunately, it's not supported. I don't know why. It's there. It does not work. It throws whatever. And then somebody says, like for Microsoft, it's not supported for third-party developers. So how do you get your contextual information inside your Teams tab? Pretty difficult, I can tell you. There are a lot of API calls for bots. So if you build an in-meeting bot, it's easy. All of the API calls are there. An in-meeting tab, like we built, pretty impossible. So what you need to do, I hope you can read it. It's okay. So you get the meeting ID. The meeting ID is a long string. It ends with 2 equal signs at the end. What does that mean? It's base64 encoded. You go decode it. You get something that starts with a 0 and a pound symbol and ends with a pound and a 0 symbol. It doesn't really look like a meeting ID because it's not. It looks like a chat ID. I don't know why people call in their API this thing a meeting ID when it's really the chat ID, but there's a chat ID. And then you replace the beginning and the end, remove it from the meeting ID, and you get the chat ID. Going with the chat ID, you can do a graph call to get the chat. If you use it on the beta endpoint of Microsoft Graph, you get this nice part at the bottom. I hope you can read it. It says join web URL for that Teams meeting, and it gives you the organizer ID and the user identity. Now, for my app, this would have been enough because I'm only distinguishing between organizer and participant. If you're not an organizer, you cannot do it. So, but I wanted more. I wanted everything. Now, you take the join web URL, because you don't get the meeting ID in here. You take the join web URL. You do another call to online meetings where you filter, not just use it, you filter on the join web URL. Then you get an array of meetings that match that join web URL, and you just take the first one, and there is all your information of your meeting. Start and end time, organizers, who are the participants, what role the participants have. It's a mess. Problem is, this works for the organizer because it does beta/me/online meetings. If my other user, that's not the organizer, would open the application and do this call, it would not work because he did not organize it. He cannot get that information. As far as I know, and I spent days on this, it is impossible for an in-meeting tab application to fetch the contextual data of that meeting if you're not the organizer of that meeting. So that's where I end this session with.
Thank you very much for the session, and thank you very much for our virtual attendees. See you in the next session.